great to be here in person, isn't it? I love having in-person events. Oops. Did it go? No. Oh, okay, sorry. The last speaker having been stopped, I've been waiting 15 minutes, so 30 seconds is nothing. All right. It's a long 30 seconds, isn't it? No. There we go. Okay. So I love to start with this title. The value of your data is worth nothing unless you use it. Obviously, that's a little provocative. But as Thomas Edison said, the value of an idea lies in the use of it. And I truly believe that the same is true with data. But fortunately, companies of all sizes and their leaders want to be data-driven. They want to leverage their data and the insights derived from it to inform their business decisions, to drive actions, whether those actions are taken by humans or machines. And when they adopt that strategy, they find that everyone across the enterprise, in all divisions, all functions, start to ask for data, to ask for insights. Whether it's customer service that wants to better route calls, or operations teams that want to optimize processes, risk teams that want to predict fraud, or marketing teams that want to better understand their customers and target outreach to specific segments, or the sales teams especially that want to qualify leads and prioritize their prospects so they don't waste their time. So with this proliferation of use cases and new analytic models, we see a massive increase in the demand for data today. So let's look at some of these examples. So you might start with reporting and dashboards, and you take transaction data and look at what happened historically last month, last year. But then decision makers are going to want to visualize it, overlaying location data to understand what happened and what the differences are across countries or across regions. But then those decision makers are going to want to understand what might happen. They're going to want to predict scenarios. So with that, they're going to look to overlay, to correlate that transaction data with maybe other internal data, a marketing campaign that went out, a new product release, an outage, or with external data, economic indicators, financial information from others, competitors' product releases, pricing of their competitors, traffic, weather, local events, so the list goes on. So as you can see, you're starting to incorporate external data as well. And then, of course, the decision makers want to know what to do in each of those scenarios, so they're looking for prescriptive analytics. And then the models get more sophisticated. They want to automate some of those models, so you're moving to AI. You need additional data to train the models and keep those models up to date, and eventually embed them into business workflows or applications. And so as you can see, the bottom line here is that the demand for data is increasing, both internal and external. And that growth that we're seeing in that demand is accelerating. But the good news is the supply of data is increasing as well. We're seeing a number of companies look to share data internally across divisions, share data externally with partners, customers, make their data available as a product or service. This image here represents the data cloud that Snowflake introduced in 2020. And when we first introduced the data cloud, each of those dots in the visualization represent an entity that is sharing data. And when we first introduced that, there were just dots around the perimeter. And now, as you can see, we've started to see these nodes emerging, these nodes forming. And those are ecosystems of companies that are sharing data. A couple of them that I want to just call out, software companies. They're software companies, software as a service companies that are sharing data back out to their customers that are using their platforms. An aggregator of COVID-19 data that makes that data available so that companies can better navigate the pandemic world and the different business contexts in which they're doing business. We have hundreds of data providers who are also using the Snowflake Data Marketplace to make their data available, to use that as a channel to market. So this is what the data cloud looks like today, and we're seeing a growth in the use of it. But let's take a quick step back and think about the cloud adoption. According to a Harvard Business Review article, cloud adoption has accelerated during the pandemic. Just this fall, their survey showed that 57% of companies have increased their budgets for cloud deployments. 53% say that they've accelerated existing projects, and 51% say that they are identifying new workloads, new projects to deploy in the cloud. Now you might think, okay, but what about here in Europe? Things might be a little bit different here in Europe. Well, according to Eurostat, between 2018 and 2020, cloud adoption increased by 50% across Europe. Now, there's some countries that are laggards. I won't name them. But actually, the leaders are here in the Nordics. 75% of firms in Finland say that they've adopted cloud, and 70% here in Sweden. So you might ask, well, what are they doing in the cloud? Well, 47% of cloud adopters have their data at least some of their data hosted. So we are seeing cloud adoption, data cloud adoption, data innovation in the cloud increasing and growing here in Europe as well. But that innovation takes different forms. So I like to represent data innovation across these two axes. The horizontal axis is how you deliver your data, whether it's raw and curated data or whether it's embedded, derived insights from the data. And then on the vertical axis, it's time to value, time to business value specifically. So if you're delivering raw data or uncurated data, there's a much slower time to value. You're delivering it to a data scientist or a developer who has to do something with it. Build a model, build an application. And as you move along the curve that you see here, the derived insights become more specific, or the data, the derived insights, the applications become more specific to the business context. And that accelerates business value. It accelerates time to value. So we see data innovation across this spectrum. Delivering the data doesn't mean it's not innovation. It could be very innovative for a specific company. For example, Finavia is the airport infrastructure provider in Finland. Now, they have made a developer portal available with data from their airports, flight schedules, arrivals, departures, queue times, what have you. And the idea is to enable developers to build applications using that data. So for Finavia, that helped them transform their company from just from an airport infrastructure provider to also a digital service provider as well. So that was an innovation for them as well, even if they were just making that data available through the developer portal. Now, another one that I actually really like is Instacart. As you can imagine, they've seen their business grow exponentially over the pandemic as people have increasingly begun to use online grocery shopping and delivery services. So Instacart now, which is the leading provider of online grocery in North America, they have over 50 million products in their catalog from over 40,000 stores. Now, they don't know exactly which products are on the shelves in which stores, but they use models to predict that. So they're using their data to predict that product availability. They know what people are buying, but they're also using the data that they have to analyze consumer trends. They make those consumer trends available through some of the thought leadership that they publish, but they also make it available to their retail partners and their CPG partners to help them forecast demand, improve products, improve customer experience, and customer loyalty. This is an example of one of the reports that they recently published. Apparently 1 in 3 users of their platform is buying plant-based alternatives to meat and dairy, which I thought was kind of interesting. This other example that I actually really like is here in Europe. This is Żabka, which is a chain of local convenience stores in Poland. They've got about 7,000 stores, and similarly, they use their data to optimize product assortment across their different stores, to optimize pricing, but also to identify new locations for stores, and to deliver insights on consumer preferences and consumer purchases back to their suppliers similarly for forecasting demand, improving products, and increasing customer satisfaction. So these are great examples across that spectrum of data innovation. Now, when data is coming and going in different directions, data leaders must ensure that people can get to where they need to get to and avoid collision and gridlock. If you think of the data as the cars, the infrastructure as the roads, we also need to think of the drivers, for example, and the rules of the road. So I look at the essentials of a data-driven company, which are, of course, establishing the strategy of data as an asset to drive business objectives, so to be data-driven. There are four pillars that you need to think about: people, process, data, and technology. We all know that. We hear a lot about that. Within the context of this analogy that I'm kind of drawing here, the data is the cars, the infrastructure that many people have adopted, the technology are the roads, but often people don't necessarily think as much about the people and process. So I like to think of data governance as the rules of the road, the terms of use. Some people think of data governance as privacy and security, maybe with a little data quality thrown in, but it covers the whole data value chain, from ingestion to insights to innovation. It's not just data security, not just data privacy, not just data quality. So at Snowflake, we talk about 3 pillars. We talk about knowing your data, so understanding your data. Where is it? What's in it? What's the sensitivity of it? Can we classify it and tag that sensitivity so that we ensure that we're treating it appropriately? Can we track the usage by user, by use case? And then, obviously, it's important to apply policies, to apply practices of protecting that data. So understanding what can be done with the data, having the appropriate access rights, role-based access rights. Sometimes that requires encryption, anonymization. Sometimes that requires row-based access or dynamic masking. So there are a variety of different techniques that you can apply to ensure that that data is protected. But ultimately, the objective is to unlock the value of data. So we focus also on ensuring that companies can share and collaborate securely and in a very governed way with their data so that they're using the data and deriving value from it. Now, I think that there's also an element that we often don't focus on. And I'm going to describe it with an example. So imagine this were your only option for breakfast. So some of you might be thinking, okay, cool, that's awesome. Others might be horrified, particularly people that are moving to plant-based products. But last year, I was speaking to the chief digital officer of Sodexo, which runs cafeterias across the world. And in one of their cafeterias, they saw an increase in breakfast sausage sales in the morning. And that was curious because this was in France, and it's not in the culinary habits of French people to eat breakfast sausage in the morning, maybe if we were in the UK. But what they found when they dug deeper was that that increase corresponded with the replacement of their traditional cash registers with point-of-sale machines that had individual buttons for each item. Now, as you can imagine, the cashiers were pressing breakfast sausage to ring up the sales. Now, perhaps no malice involved. They were just trying to move people along quickly. But the bottom line was the data that they were capturing was incorrect. So if the managers had used that data to replenish stocks, the next month the customers would have had nothing but breakfast sausage. Now, why is that important? Because those cashiers probably didn't recognize that they were capturing data, that they had a role in this data-driven organization. And in fact, many employees don't. We did a qualitative survey where we asked 3 questions of an online panel. Do you work with data? Are you comfortable working with data? And what kind of training would you like to improve your ability to work with data? And what we found was many people answered that they didn't work with data. And we got answers like this. We don't really analyze data where I work. We don't calculate or do any aggregation of data. We'll create spreadsheets on various subjects, but that's more of a way to track issues and keep a record. It isn't data calculations. Now, if you're hearing the same thing I'm hearing, this person is equating data to numbers. They're not seeing themselves as someone who contributes to this data-driven company. And this could be the cashier. It could be a field technician closing out a work order. It could be an administrator in a hospital dismissing a patient. So actually, when I tell my sausage story to other people, I get a lot of heads that nod. We have the same problem. We also found that there were people who worry about the error of their colleagues. So we got answers like this. I'm a wizard with spreadsheets and simulators. We all know somebody like this. Data speaks to me. Getting correct and useful data can be an obstacle. The data must be reliable and unbiased by the collectors. Or, I work as an administrator for financial advisors. You wouldn't believe how much incorrect data is out there. Clients divorce, move house, change jobs, change employers. They don't tell us. Or, they do tell us, but my colleagues don't update anything. So again, these people do work with data. They're comfortable working with data, but they're worried about the errors of their colleagues. So, to be truly data-driven, an organization, stole my punchline. An organization must think about data literacy. Now, not just data literacy as you hear from many vendors today. It's not about data democratization and everybody having access to visualization tools. It's not focused just on the data experts. It's broader than that, and it extends to everybody across the organization, the cashiers, the field technicians, whomever. So these data literacy programs need to be holistic and need to address 4 objectives. Increasing awareness. What is data today? How is it used within the organization? What value does it deliver to my organization? And what's my role across that entire data value chain? The second is comprehension, understanding. So this is data decision makers, or decision makers. We want them to be data-driven. Do we really teach them how to use data and make decisions? We actually found that less than half of decisions made within an organization are based on quantitative information, quantitative information and analysis, as opposed to experience, opinion, or instinct, gut. And that's because we don't necessarily teach people how to make those data-driven decisions, how to ask the right questions. Is this sample size significant? Is this sample representative? What's the underlying analytic or logic in the model? And so we need to give them a confidence so that they can use the insights that they're delivered, they can question them, but they can understand where they come from, and they can base a decision on those insights. And then, of course, we can't forget our experts. We need to make sure that they have access to the latest tools, that they have access to all the data that they need to train the models that they're using to deliver these insights to the decision makers. But we also need to use those experts to scale, to have them give back to the organization, help create a data-driven culture, having office hours, giving webinars, giving seminars, providing back to the organization so that we can create more of a broader data community within the organization. So, in sum, data innovation as we've seen it across that spectrum of different types of data innovation and using all of the data that we've got available and the new analytic tools that we have available, that requires more than just technology solutions. Data-driven organizations must establish data governance, the appropriate rules of the road, if you will, and they need to ensure that there is a level of data literacy across the entire organization, all employees. And I posit that the best way to do that is actually to start with onboarding and making sure when you're bringing new employees into a company that they understand that they are coming into a data-driven organization and that they understand what their role will be. Because your data is worth nothing unless you use it. And as Thomas Edison has said, the value of an idea lies in the use of it. And the same is true with data. So with that, I think we're going to open it up for questions if there are any. We've got a few minutes left.